Alrighty, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mason Hauk, and with me today is Sherry Nettles. Just as kind of a little bit of a housekeeping before we jump into this webinar today, all of this will be recorded and will be available to you guys at a later date, along with the PowerPoint slide deck as well. That way you can share it with any of your colleagues, coworkers, or even some friends if you have someone who's interested in AP automation. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about our webinar today. So today's topic is the evolution of AP automation for 2021. So with me today is going to be Sherry Nettles. So Sherry, would you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a senior financial consultant for RPI Consultants. I specialize in Lawson Infor implementations, as well as AP automation solutions and full finance suite assessments. I've been in the marketplace about 25 years in the Lawson Infor healthcare market, implementing Infor products, and as well as AP automation solutions. Fun facts about me, we like to throw in some little fun snippets too. I'm the proud mom of 2 teenagers. We're sort of surviving online learning here at home. It's a lot of togetherness. We're currently building our dream beach home in Fenwick Island, Delaware. I live here in Maryland, about half hour north of the Baltimore office, RPI office. And I love AP automation. And yes, I know I need to get out more, but I get really excited about this topic and love presenting on this topic with Mason. So we're really excited to dive in and teach her what we know. Thank you.
Awesome. So my name is Mason Hauk. I'm an accounts payable and automation guru. So I've worked on multiple different implementations. I've worked a lot with the Infor ERP system, but I've also done a lot of work with Microsoft Dynamics and SAP as well. Where my specialization is kind of specifically within the integrations for our AP solutions. So that is just making sure that everything's talking together, allowing you guys to have one place where you can view all of your information and generate all of your reports out of. With that as well, I'm our Yoga Connect product owner, which is a software that we'll talk about kind of a little bit today, which helps kind of drive a lot of those integration points. A fun fact about me is I've actually raced on the Michigan International Speedway in a Formula One style open wheel race car. And then obviously I had to put my Let's Go Chiefs down there at the bottom. I'm in our Kansas City office here, so I may have to make sure I give a little shout out for our Chiefs for this upcoming weekend. So kind of our agenda for today. So we are going to first take a look at last year, so kind of a year in review for the challenges that we faced in 2020 and some of those temporary workarounds that we've put in place to be able to at least try to continue our jobs as much as possible. And then after that, we're going to take a step back and kind of talk about this year. So what are some priorities that we should be addressing for 2021? And how do we help relieve some of those workarounds that we had to come up with on the fly last year? After that, we're going to take a moment and actually analyze the anatomy of the accounts payable automation solutions. So kind of talking about the entire automation process from the beginning of the invoice being either emailed or received all the way through the payment process. So where are areas that we can automate, where are areas that we can relieve stress from our teams. After that, one of my favorite things to do is an actual live in the wild, as we tend to call them, but it's going to be a demo of invoice processing. And then specifically, we're going to be utilizing Kofax ReadSoft Online and Infor Financials for this today. And then at the end, we're going to do a quick summary and then open it up for your guys' questions. And those questions can be anything from just basic, can you elaborate on XYZ to even some more complex questions and on how some of this would work in your guys' current day solutions. So as Sherry has shared earlier, both her and I have spent a lot of time in accounts payable, and it's actually, we enjoyed a lot. So those questions are very, very rewarding because we get to help you guys relieve some of that stress that you guys have today. So with that, let's go ahead and let's jump into our year in review. So those challenges that we faced last year and the workarounds we came up with them. So I'm sure if we asked every single one of you guys on the line, you would have a unique element to some of the challenges that you faced last year. But these are kind of some of the highest, kind of the biggest issues that we ran into last year that we heard from our clients. So how did we retrieve and capture those physical invoices that were coming into the office when we had to go to a remote workforce? We're going to continually receive mail into our offices, and we still need to make sure that those invoices are getting paid on a timely manner. So how do we approach that, and how do we solution around that? After that, we're going to talk. One of the other big challenges was the manual invoice that had to be routed for approval. A lot of people don't realize how much physical paper is being moved in their AP processes until they had to take a step back and go to that remote workforce. So how do you get those invoices still approved, but also when you are working remote? After that, one of the big challenges that we faced was the physical check requests and expense reports. This is still very much a paper process, and almost in the majority of healthcare and other organizations that we work with a lot. So when you no longer have executives or anything along those lines to approve these, you tend to run into some issues there. Another challenge that we ran into was just around our vendors. So this was vendor maintenance, vendor documents, and vendor communication. When you're no longer in the office and you can't grab that W-9, or you need to make sure that you get documents updated. When you're just not in the office next to that filing cabinet, it becomes really difficult unless you have kind of an electronic content management. But even that, even with those solutions, we still had a really hard time communicating with those vendors because everyone was just playing phone tag and things along those lines. One of the biggest challenges that we ran into this year was just general communication, specifically interdepartment communication. So this can be anything from going from an AP processor out to an executive who needs to sign off on an invoice. But this can also go down to just communication both within our AP teams and our AP teams and our supply chain. We rely a lot on those conversations that can happen more naturally, but when we're not in the office to have those conversations, we actually have to pick up the phone. It just tends to add additional frustration. And then finally, one of the other big challenges that we ran into this year was processing those check runs. So being on site, sitting next to that printer as those checks are being printed and then getting them into the mail as well. So like I said, these are just some of our big challenges that we faced. I'm sure there is an onslaught of other issues and challenges that each one of you guys had to work with as well this year. So what were some of the temporary workarounds that we did to get these challenges kind of addressed? So one of the first one is a lot of departments ended up having to send people into the office to retrieve the mail or do those check runs. And this is especially risky to our staff and to our team. Especially risky if your AP departments are located inside the hospitals as well, because now you're having to go through where potential patient exposure is and things along those lines. The other thing was a lot of people spent money on postage and shipping. So if you couldn't, no longer could take that invoice down and put it in someone's desk, or, if you relied on that interdepartment mailing, all of a sudden, instead of being able to leverage on those, we're now having to leverage actual mail, putting it in the mail, sending it out, and then now we have lag time between that. So from whenever that piece of mail gets shipped to whenever it's received is additional time that invoice is not getting approved, and then they have to approve it and then mail it back. And now you're looking at additional time there as well, which just does not allow for our invoices to get approved in a timely manner. One of the other big workarounds that we had to come up with this year is just converting those general conversations that we would have in the office to emails and phone calls, which just tends to add a lot of frustration, specifically around, with your emails. They just tended to be endless strings going back and forth with really no resolution. And you're having to, take 15, 20 different responses to get an invoice fixed, which is just not time effective for anyone. On top of that, there's also phone tag, trying to call someone and then, leave them a message, and then they would try to call you back and leave you a message. And this is just, part of that process when you're trying to stay on top of invoices and you don't have good visibility into the system. And these are things that just really start to add to frustration to our staff. Instead of being able to walk down and have that 5-minute conversation, you're now looking at an hour to an hour and a half to fix this one single invoice. So add an additional stress to our teams. And the biggest workarounds that we saw this year were some of the remote desktop and access for those on-premise softwares. So this is, your Citrix, your remote desktops, any of this type of stuff, trying to access that from home. You're having to try to get in through the firewalls. And if there's any issues, now you have to open up a ticket with your IT help desk. And depending on your IT help desk, you could range that from, I've had some really good clients where you have quick responses. I've had some other clients where, you have 2 to 3 days before, with access issues. And this just, like I said earlier, adds to that general frustration of you're just trying to get your job done and you're just not able to move forward.
We had actually, Mason and I were just on a Cloud Suite implementation together that just went live in the fall. And one of our big challenges was they didn't even have working equipment for the teams. They had desktops in the office, but they didn't have laptops for their staff to be able to even work from home. So there's a lot of, basic even equipment challenges too with making sure the team has proper equipment to be able to work remotely. Yeah,
and one of the issues we saw there was just the slower performance as well. Mm-hmm. So now they're waiting for pages to load, and it just slows everything down.
Very, very frustrating. Yes.
Yeah. So what do these workarounds do to our teams, though? And the number one is definitely fear of getting sick. I mean, this was a very, very challenging year that we've just concluded here. And, there's definitely some lingering issues into this year as well. But that's one of the biggest impacts on our teams. Another one is about confusion about the processes and technologies. If you had a standard procedure on how you logged into a system or things along those lines, but now you're having to add some sort of a Citrix or a VPN or any of that type of stuff on the front end, it just adds more and more steps to those processes, which just tends to add additional stress onto our teams. As we talked about a little bit on that last slide, missing or antiquated software or hardware. So if you have slow computers, that's just slowing down the process. I've had a lot of clients talk about, they're able to use Citrix, but their IT team has it locked down so they can't copy files back and forth. So it's like they have to do all of their work on the one machine, which I totally understand the IT restrictions to that as well. But that's just one more thing that, impacts your guys' teams. All of this leads to additional hours and stress due to these manual processes. Like I talked earlier, instead of being able to walk down and have a quick conversation about the invoice, you're now in a long string of phone tag, which just, turns that one invoice time dramatically up. And these manual processes just bring frustration. And it's frustration about limited access, it's frustration with communication, and then just frustration with support as well. And when our teams are frustrated, they're not performing to what we need them to be. And we definitely want to address those as quickly as possible.
And we saw that as an issue too, where teams were having to divide and conquer. So because of COVID restrictions, the teams were having to split in half. So half of the team would be on site in the office, half the team is remote working from home, and then trying to coordinate tasks and get any kind of efficiency within your department obviously is really tricky when your people aren't all in one physical location.
Yeah, and that's a big one as well, because even when you're trying to divide up some of those tasks, it might not be a task that person had specialized in as much. So now they're also having to learn new processes. So just general frustration. If I could summarize all of 2020, it's just frustration.
Yeah.
And these
should
are
be the title of our slide.
Just should have just put on this next slide here.
There you go.
So, we want to fix these issues going forward, right? So what are our priorities for next year? And I'm going to replace the word frustration with automation. So what are some things that we can do to begin to remove those frustrations? So the first thing we can do is we can start looking towards, our next solutions here, which are going to be cloud-based solutions and softwares. They're no longer going to be on-prem. So that way you don't have to rely on, remote desktops, Citrix or VPNs, things along those lines. As long as you have a computer that has, a web browser, they can log in, they can just do their job. They don't have to worry about all of these IT restrictions. With that as well, it also simplifies the remote workstation hardware, right? So as long as you have the laptop, you're good to go. You don't have to have a laptop that has had this software installed, and then, if that specific software wasn't installed, now you have to take it into IT to get it installed, or any of those type of things, right? We want to get it down to more of a simplified system. And that's really what some of these cloud-based solutions are working towards, is a simplified element there. Another big one that automation can help tackle is reducing the manual interventions and tasks. So this is where we're really going to start talking about kind of some of the AP automation portions. So this is capture, process, and route those documents digitally. We don't want to walk around anymore and try to take invoices to individual desks. We don't want to have to, if we need to have a conversation with our supply chain team, we don't want to have to take that invoice, scan it, put it in an email, send it over to them, wait for them to respond back, and then do whatever you needed to in the system, right? We want all those conversations to just happen in the system. That way everyone has the same visibility into exactly what we're talking about. And the biggest thing with automation is just also increasing the transparency, and like I said, that collaboration as well. So we want to, with automation, we want to provide that real-time visibility into exactly where our invoices are and like what is going on with them as well. So this is, if it's out for approval, we want to know how long it's been out for approval. Who is it currently sitting with? So who are we waiting on, right? That way, if I take a look and say, oh man, I have a whole bunch of invoices that are out for, this approval and are waiting on the same person, that's where we start to gain that visibility into the system there. And then with the collaboration, we just want to connect our users. We want to, there's still going to be a lot of remote work going forward. And we want to try to future-proof ourselves a little bit to have that conversation easier rather than playing constant phone tag back and forth.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Mason. The collaboration tool within Cloud Suite gives you the ability to collaborate within the application. So then you're not kind of losing track of things that you're trying to research in an email trail that's buried in your 5,000 email inbox. So it's really a great tool that we can look at.
Yeah. So what are some of the specific accounts payable automation elements we can do? So the first one, which is one of the easiest ones to get knocked out right out the start, is automating that invoice capture. So this is, either emails are coming into a system, and right now you're saving off the PDFs into whatever process you're doing, or you're printing them, and then, whatever that process is, we don't want that anymore. We don't want to have another person touching that invoice, right? We want that invoice to come into an email. We want that attachment to automatically be taken off and either brought into like an OCR or brought into some sort of queue where we can begin to index them. If we can't get to email, there's always going to be vendors that are sending us actual mail in the mail. So how do we speed up our mailroom scanning? And how do we make sure that the quality of the scans are still there, right? A lot of times when we speed up that mailroom scanning, we start to see a lot of, we call it noise on the invoice. So it's those little black specks, things like that. It's just not getting a good capture. And then another thing is start to leverage EDI more. There are more and more vendors that are working with our EDI providers that you can get set up and remove that, their fax numbers or anything along those lines and just get them over to EDI. There's still, you'll still have to work some exceptions with EDI, but it's no longer having to either, manually index or go through OCR, which is just a big win. Another automation step that we can do is we can automate those check requests and those expense reports that are coming in right now on those paper, right? So some of our ERP systems are beginning to include these type of forms in their out-of-the-box implementations. Infor, which is the one that Sherry and I have worked with a lot here recently, now has what's called the request new invoice payment form, which is kind of supposed to fill in that hole a little bit with check requests. And it's all IPA based, so any of your either consultants or tech people can work with that to kind of, tweak it a little bit to work for your guys' companies. But if you're not looking at a full ERP, or you want to stay with your ERP that you have now, we can also take a look at digital forms. So these are just forms that allow our users to fill out information, and then there's an area where we can review those and then automatically create records and things along those lines in our systems. So if you're using like an Infor V10 still, that's where like your digital forms would come in to play a role there. The other big one is we can start leveraging OCR. So OCR is optimal character recognition. So when we scan our invoice into the system, it will read all of the words that are on that invoice, and we'll start to pick out the data that's needed for that. So there's kind of the two areas that you can do with OCR. There's your header and footer data. So this is just capturing your vendor, your invoice amount, your invoice date, kind of your primary key fields. But then there's that line item matching, which takes this one step further. So this is where we, actually do some sync up, and with master data, we can do validation as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We have a whole slide dedicated to OCR here in a little bit. And then one of the other big automation steps we can do is invoice approval matrices and routing. So it's no longer, oh, I know Joe is in charge of this department, I'm going to send it to Joe, right? This is, you choose the department off the GL structure, you press go, and it just goes. So kind of a big automation step there as well. So we talked a little bit about kind of some of the things that we can do in the process. So let's take a look at kind of the anatomy of the accounts payable automation setup and kind of see how this would look from the beginning to the end. So here on our far left, we have that invoice capture. So this is that scanned invoices, emailed, faxed, things along those lines. And we have a slide for each of these afterwards. So this is just kind of the overview here. So after that, it would move on to our data capture. So it's going to pull that data off of the invoice for us and present it. If it has high confidence, it will just proceed. If it needs some verification or needs some exceptions, it would bring it up for our AP staff to review. Our AP staff then can fix whatever they need to or send it off to some exceptions and workflows. So those exceptions and workflows can be anything for invoice, vendor, depending on what your company's needs are. After it's gone through those workflows, we want to get it out for approval if it's needed for approval. So getting it out there through automation, so they're no longer picking who it goes to. And then also one big thing we'll talk about there is escalation as well. After we've received the approval, we want to make sure all of this information is stored. So we want to make sure the invoice image is stored. We want to make sure the invoice data is stored. We want to know who approved it, all of that. So for the actual images, we look at storing that within like an on-base, a Perceptive Image Now, or Infor document management if you're part of the Cloud Suite Financials element. And then at the end, we want to make sure that we've marked that invoice for payment and get it out the door. That way, we've seen it through the process and we're done now. So let's take a little bit more of an in-depth look at invoice document capture. So with document capture, there's kind of two main ways that we can take documents in. So there's your email capture. So this is where we talked about earlier, pulling those exact invoice attachments off from an email inbox and automatically putting them into the workflow. You're not having a human save those images off. You're not doing anything along those lines. It's all automated. And that way we can take our staff and put them to more valuable areas. If you're still trying to look for faxed images, there's also fax elements that we can do and add to support these, where we receive faxes, they're generated into images, and then they go through this process anyway. There's also the scanning of those mailed or hard copies. So with some of the automation, we want to use automatic separation. So this is, if you have a 10-page invoice and another 10-page invoice, it's not scanning them separately. It's either sliding a blank piece of paper or a barcode in there and just throwing it all on the scanner and letting it scan, or letting the system do that document separation for you. It's also all about having it automatically do color correction, noise reduction, any of that type of stuff to make sure that the quality of the image is as high as possible for our OCR.
Hey, Mason, I'm going to jump in. This is Michael Hopkins. I'm your friendly moderator today. We have a question that popped up in the chat that I think is relevant to what you're talking about. Wondering how to differentiate invoice statements from invoices in email attachments.
That is an excellent question. And that's a question we get a lot, right? So a lot of people have a single inbox right now that you receive your W-9s into, you receive your invoice images to, you receive your general questions into, right? So what we want to start doing is we want to separate those. We want to kind of create a mailbox for each of them. So typically the number one email address is like an AP invoices at your company's domain. And we direct all of our vendors to just send their invoices there. It is an unmonitored system. So if they need to ask questions, they can still utilize your old email address. That's where you'll still take statements, W-9s, questions, but you just want to send the AP invoices, invoices just there.
Thanks. We have one more question pop up too, specific to OnBase. This customer is using OnBase to capture invoices. Is there an API to integrate or standardize invoice data between OnBase and Oracle? Specifically, is there a standard API in OnBase?
Yes, so OnBase does have a standard API. It's a typical REST API setup that you can leverage that would allow you to be able to connect to it and pull or push data back and forth. You'll either need some sort of like a connect software, or you'll need some sort of like a script to do it automatically though. And we can talk a little bit more about that at the end if we have some time as well. Any other questions, Michael? Or are we good to go?
I think we're good to move on. Thanks, Mason.
Awesome.
You guys, I'm sorry, I just did see one pop back up from Mary Beth. Hi, Mary Beth. When vendors send statements to the invoice mailbox, does the system know this and to reject, throw it out, or does it try to create an invoice from the statement?
Send statements. So essentially what would happen would that would enter the OCR, and then it would just, because it would not have the correct fields that we would need, it would drop into one of the verification queues. So then when your verifier came in to go through and look at that and fill out the missing information, they would identify that that's a statement and not an invoice. And then they can either completely delete it and back it out of the system, or you can put specifically like workflows where they could say, oh, this is a statement, it needs to go here, and it would just go there. Awesome. So once we've talked a little bit about capture, right? The next step is how do we get this data off of this electronic image that we have now? So there's always the tried and true keying of the information, right? But this is a very time-consuming task, and one that really your AP staff should be focusing on other more valuable adds to the organization than looking at an invoice image and typing out the information. So one of the most common ways to start to alleviate that pressure and remove some of that responsibility away from our AP staff is OCR. So with OCR, like I said earlier, we have that header level data. So it can extract the vendor remit tos, the invoice number, invoice date, amounts, things along those lines. That would all be considered as part of the header level data. On top of that, for our purchase orders, we can also do the line item pairing. So this is extraction of each individual purchase order line off of the invoice image. But while we can extract invoice lines, relatively simple, the next level of this is we actually want to match these based off of master data. So with our OCR solutions, we want to put that purchase order data behind it. So that way, when it finds that purchase order and it finds those lines, it can already start to do the matching on the back end for us. The reason for this is it really helps with our validation. So with our data validation, we want to bring over as much information as we can. So the two big ones that we talk about always is the vendor master. So we want to bring over the entire vendor master, which helps with the extraction process, which helps with the confidence as well, which increases our straight through processing numbers. The other thing we want to bring over is that purchase order data. So while, every company, it seems, has different structures with their invoices. So if we can bring in data on the back end to assist the OCR in recognizing what it's supposed to be looking for, it's going to dramatically increase, what it can pull off without us needing to help. So OCR is a really powerful tool that is really supposed to assist you guys in allowing your AP staff to do things that would be, more value add to the organization.
This is what we get super jazzed about, Mason and I as a finance person who's seen AP departments literally buried alive in paper and having to manually key all that information. This is just such a huge game changer to your organization by being able to capture that data electronically and flow it directly into the application instead of your team having to type everything in manually. Really a game changer.
Yes. With that, we always have to take a moment to talk about our exceptions, right? Because it doesn't matter what system we design, there's always going to need to be some exceptions where our teams are going to need to get in and get their hands dirty with that invoice. So some of the most common with like invoice exceptions is a mismatched vendor on the invoice versus the vendor on the purchase order. So analyzing that, figuring out what's our next steps forward, that's just really not something that is too automated. Without a lot of restrictions and a lot of rules. So it's still one of the more, it's one of the better workflows to allow your team to get in and handle those. The other big ones are vendor exceptions. So if this is a new vendor who's just all of a sudden started invoicing you, right? Parking these invoices over there so that we can get this new vendor set up and make sure that it is a valid invoice. And then there's also the missing remit tos as well. Either it's a new remit to or they've changed locations, all that vendor master maintenance portion. We want to try to put some of these in workflows so that way our AP staff can take the time at that moment to fix our master data. If we fix our vendor master data at that moment, what it's going to do is the next time that invoice comes in, it's already going to be solved, right? That's the whole kind of point of automation is we want to fix our issues as they come up. So that way we can make sure that we're only seeing that type of issue once or twice and not, here's another 50 invoices today that have mismatched vendors because we have 5 or 6 duplicate vendors, right? No one wants to see that type of stuff every single day and work that. And it's not valuable to the organization. And then finally, we just sometimes need manual review. There's a wide selection of exceptions that you can leverage for manual review. Once that's been completed, though, we need to get that invoice out for approval, right? So it's gone through, AP's seen it, and now it needs to go out and get that approval from our teams. So this is where approval routing comes in. So first off, there's approver notifications. So when that invoice is submitted for approval, we can generate an email, send that directly to the approver. The approver can click on that link and be taken directly into the system where they can approve the invoice. Sometimes, though, we either have people that aren't approving their invoices on time, or they're on vacation, or they're on paid time off, or anything along those lines, right? So escalations becomes a really key portion to invoice approvals. That way, you're not having an invoice that's been out there for 60 days waiting for someone to approve on it, and now the vendor's calling you and threatening to put you on credit hold. That's not how we want that to function. So we can automatically escalate them after a set amount of time. And that set amount of time is work days, right? So it's not, oh, you only get 48 hours. It's no, you get 48 work hours to address this type of issue. This also dramatically, like I said, increases the approval time, but it also really increases accountability because typically the next approver on the hierarchy is going to be that person's boss or director, or that's just typically how the approval hierarchies function. And when that person is now looking and saying, why am I getting all of these invoices escalated? They can hold that person accountable. And it almost removes AP from that equation because it's now the director or manager that's handling that accountability to their first or second level approvers. The other huge one with invoice approval and approval routing is actually starting to allow our approvers to code the invoices. Now, this is a pretty big one for a lot of our AP teams. And it's because, it's also a really big hit, right? Our AP team having to figure out how to code every single invoice takes a lot of time, and empowering our approvers to do that for us, make sure that it's more accurate because they're the ones that actually know what accounts it's going to. And it also holds them accountable when their monthly or yearly budgetary reviews come around.
And this is terrific functionality here because we can actually create what's called structure relations within, anyway, the Infor application that we work with mostly, that actually restricts the coder to only select accounts that were budgeted for. So it prevents a lot of time and effort in having to recode miscoded invoices that might happen during the month. So it's really super beneficial.
Yep, and it's all about empowering the end user as well with that. With all of that, though, with automation, right, we want to make sure that all of this is stored in a safe and easily accessible location to the people with the correct security. So what we want to do is we want to store these documents so our AP team and our approvers can view those images. But one of the other big ones we want to do is we want to allow for historical storage. So this can be, let's say, I've managed my relationship with this vendor for years now, right? And that vendor's calling me up and saying, hey, where's my invoice, right? Instead of me saying, oh, let me go do research and then I have to call AP, we want to empower that person to be able to look in the system, see what its statuses are, and be able to answer that question for that vendor right then and there. So making sure just all of our content is accessible to our users. One thing we want to talk about, though, is don't forget about that vendor maintenance, right? There are a lot of forms surrounding vendor maintenance that can really help automate those portions as well. So that can be either a new vendor setup, additional remit to setup, or that vendor address change. By allowing it to be an easy form to be filled out by our AP team, they can get those type of changes into their vendor master person quicker. So that way they can get changed and we're not having to constantly, either hold a whole bunch of invoices because the vendor's not set up or constantly have to change the information. So it's all about, getting that to the vendor maintenance person quickly. So I've kind of talked here for a little bit about, the process and everything along those lines, but I want to take a moment to actually go in and give you guys a quick demo as well. So just kind of a quick software architecture. So we're going to start with Yoga Capture. So this invoice was actually emailed to an inbox, was pulled automatically off of the inbox, and was brought into ReadSoft Online. ReadSoft Online is going to do our OCR. So I'm going to show you guys that OCR process and the validation form. And then in between there, we leverage a software called Yoga Connect. It's a software we've built in-house here with RPI, and its entire job is to connect softwares together. So this one's the setup we have specifically here is ReadSoft Online to Infor Cloud Suite Financials, or FSM. But Yoga Connect has multiple different connectors on it. So we've connected from anything from Microsoft Dynamics 365 over to DocuSign, over to any of your Perceptive elements. So it's just a main connector tool. Then we are going to talk with Infor Cloud Suite Financials with AP automation. And then finally, all of our stuff is stored in Infor Document Management. So we're going to take a look at a non-PO and walk through kind of the approval process with that non-PO. So with that, I'm going to jump out of our PowerPoint. And we're going to jump into Infor Cloud Suite Financials. So one thing that we try to do with any of our projects is we try to create and kind of make a seamless interaction for our users. So one thing we do with a lot of our projects is we put embedded links. So instead of your team having to remember where ReadSoft Online is, we just put a nice button right here for them to click. So then if they have single sign-on, they can just go directly through. For this environment, I don't have single sign-on enabled. But this is ReadSoft Online here. So over here on our left-hand side, we can see the verify status. So these are any of the invoices that we need to go through and verify. So there was either something that the system wasn't 100% sure on, or information that was missing that our teams need to review. So I'm going to open up this first one right here. And here is my invoice image right here in the middle. So nice and easy for me to view. And then over here on the right-hand side, I have these different fields that the system has actually extracted from the invoice. So anything with a green checkbox means that it has a high confidence that it extracted the correct value. If I want to see where it's extracted that, I can even click in the field. And you see when I click on invoice number, it highlights that right there. So we can see the date, the invoice number. So we can see that right there. Anything that it wasn't 100% sure on or has some sort of an error. So like, for example, I purposely left this one with a due date that has already passed. So that way I could show you this error. So this one is just telling us that the due date, cannot occur before today. I'm going to tell it that that's okay, that I want it to. So I'm going to press enter. And it says, do you want to ignore this error and set the field status to complete? I'll click yes. It is telling me that it did not find a purchase order number, which that's totally fine because this is a non-PO invoice. So I'm just going to do the same thing and press enter. And then finally, the last bit of information it needs is the routing category. So the routing category is what's going to drive our approval process in Infor. So for this, I can press the down arrow and I can see some of our options here. And I'm going to choose financial accounting because I know that this cleaning service is supposed to go to the financial accounting division. So to select that, I'll go ahead and press enter. And when I do, we're going to watch this OK button down here. So right now it's kind of grayed out. And when I validate this last field, we can see that that button turns nice bright green. So now I can press OK here. And we're actually going to send that invoice out. So we can see that it's now in progress. And the status is document export in progress. So now let's jump over and take a look at the Infor side. And I'll let Sherry kind of take and talk a little bit about the Infor solution over here. Oh, Sherry, you are on mute if you want to unmute yourself real quick.
Unmuting comes in handy. Okay, so if we want to look up in the upper left-hand corner of our screen above Mason's name, we'll see Payables Manager, which is our roles. So Infor Cloud Suite is all role-based. So when I'm in my role as Payables Manager, my landing page is what this beautiful dashboard is called, where I can see some really useful information dashboarded out for me right when I log into the system, which is really helpful. When I first saw this as a finance and AP person, I was like, oh, some people are really going to like this. You can also customize your dashboard to present whatever information you'd like to see, which is really helpful. So the main place we are going to go as a payables manager and an invoice processor is our Manage Invoices menu option over on the left under our RSO link. So our Manage Invoices is where we're going to camp out most of the time as a processor. Notice we have a lot of panels or tabs across the top of our screen, which I also loved when I first saw this presentation. Being able to see every invoice, no matter what status it is in, is very, very useful because you're not having to run countless reports or search all over the place to find out where your invoice is. You can simply click on a tab or use an easy search button. But where we are going to go for items coming directly out of RSO is into the unsubmitted tab. So that's where Mason's going to navigate now. So anything coming to us from RSO is going to land in this unsubmitted tab where we can review it as the AP processor. We can also do straight through processing, and we can talk about that as well. So we're looking here for our Cities of Fountain Cleaning invoice, which Mason's pointing to right now. And to open that, we can just simply double click on that invoice, which will open up our invoice view. So we're going to take a look at that. And there's not a lot I need to do here as an AP processor. I'm just going to take a quick review of this invoice. And the main thing I'm looking for is any errors with the invoice and to make sure it has a routing category that Mason talked about a minute ago. So our errors exist message, if you see that right at the top there, Mason just highlighted in red, that is expected. So the way we designed our invoice approval is that our first level approver is going to be responsible to code the invoice and send that out to the next approver if need be. So we would expect to see this error message. We will also expect to see that out of balance up in the upper right-hand corner, because that is the amount of the invoice that still needs to be coded, okay? So if we look at, I want to show you the total tax amount. We'll see at the top of our invoice, you'll see a $43.75 total tax amount. Now what's neat is Mason was able to use Yoga Connect to, if we click on the distributions tab on the left side of our screen here, we will see already we've created for you the distribution line for tax. The reason this is hugely beneficial is this used to be a line that AP processors would have to key themselves. So this is already done for you. It's already done for the first level approver, so they don't have to code that information. It's already complete. Okay, so we want to make sure that is there, which we can already see it is. And then we're going to just click back on our main tab on the left-hand side. And we're going to scroll down on our screen a little bit to that invoice routing category field. And what we see there is our 10-2060, which is what Mason assigned as the verifier over in RSO. Okay, so that's going to go to the financial accounting department for approval. So I, as the AP person, I might actually also want, for whatever reason, to look at the invoice image just to double check something. To do that, I can click in my upper right-hand corner. I see the left pointing double caret. That's called contextual apps. And this brings in our invoice image. I'm not seeing it there, Mace. But normally we would see an invoice image here that we can pop up and open and look at. Okay, so we'll take a look at that in a minute there. And if we scroll down and we know that our routing category is there, so I, as the AP approver or AP person, is going to just click on the submit for approval button to get that routed out to the first level approver. Okay, so we're going to click submit for approval. We're going to get this little pop-up box here that gives me, as the AP processor, the opportunity to enter a note or comment if I want to that first level approver. One example might be Cities of Fountain Cleaning is really upset. They're threatening credit hold, whatever. You know, this is a rush, some such comment. You don't need to put something here, but if something is a particular rush, you might want to do that because that note will get to the first level approver. So once we enter our note, if we want one, we're just going to click on the OK button to get that routed on. And again, it's going to give us an error message or another dialog box just saying, do you know that your distributions are out of balance? Yes, we do. Do you want to proceed? We're going to click yes to get that routed forward. Okay, so we get a dialog in the upper right that says invoice submitted for approval. Now we set ourselves up, Mason and I, as first and second level approver. So Mason is going to show you what that looks like. He's the first level approver. So he's going to navigate right under his name. There's a little tray with an arrow that's an in basket, like a little in basket. We're going to click on that. And Mason's going to highlight his name in the upper portion of the screen in light blue. When we do that, we see Mason's work items at the bottom of the screen, which is the invoice that we just submitted to Mason for approval. Now to open that is just going to double click that to open it up. And we'll see if you have an image there, Mason. I think maybe our image, not sure where our image went.
It's a misconfiguration. I put the wrong company number in the code.
Oh, okay, no worries. So normally you would see your invoice image there. So just imagine that's there for you. So that's usually not an issue. So here, as the first level approver, I'm going to look at what do I need to code here. And I can see if I click on my distribution tab is what I want to look at to see what distributions are here for me already. So I'm going to see my $43.75 tax amount that we already had created using Yoga. And then I'm just going to click on the create on list button to create that additional line of coding. Now what we use too in this application, you can use what's called configuration console to add some little configurations on the screen. And what we did was add the invoice routing category here on the screen for the approver to indicate to them, it's kind of basically 2/3 of your code block, right? Because it has your company number in the first position and the department number in the second position. So that gives the coder a good chunk of the code block to enter. So we're going to enter 10 in the company field. We're going to enter 2060 in the department field. And then account number, say for example, I as the coder don't know the account, I can use my search box and just click on my little magnifying glass. And that's going to pull up a nice list view where I can enter a description of the account, which Cities of Fountain Cleaning, I know that's a purchase service. So I'm going to enter a description of purchase or service, and I can get either one. And I can get some accounts listed there that might prompt my memory to say, oh yeah, I want to use other purchase services, 690-120. I can just click on that and it will populate in the account box. and I can tab through the other fields that we're not using and over to my amount field. And I'm just going to enter my $700 there. Okay, 700. I'm going to click save at the top of that view there. Save. All right, change, complete, continue. And then at the top of my screen, if everything's good to go, I'm just going to click on approve at the top of my screen. And that's going to send us based on dollar threshold to the next level approver, because in our structure, we have first level approver can approve up to $500. Because this exceeds 500, it's going to flow out to the second level approver, which is me, Sherry Nettles. So Mason, just for the sake of this demo, has the capability to see my queue as well, but normally he obviously would see only his own. But he's going to click on my name, and now I see my work unit to be the second level approver on this invoice. Now we'll notice here, I don't need to code it as the second level approver because Mason's already done that work for me. So I'm just reviewing to make sure, yep, tax looks correct. My coding is correct. I'm making sure that looks accurate. When our image is in here, I can also use contextual apps to pop that open and look at my image if need be. And once I'm good to go here and everything looks fine, I can click on my approve button at the top of the screen. Now, once we know if I am the last approver there, that invoice is then going to flow directly into a release status because it's reached all the approval requirements on that invoice. So if I navigate to my released tab within the application, I can see my invoice that we just processed is right on the top of my list here in a release status, which release status means it's ready to go based on due date, and it will drop for payment in my next check run based on what dates I'm paying in that particular run. Okay. I know that was super speedy and we talked really fast. Does anybody have any questions about what we just showed you? Just full end-to-end automation. Really, we've implemented this solution for a couple of customers already, and they're very, very happy with it. And we kind of brought them from a complete paper process into using these tools, and they're very, very excited about how well things are going, as we are too. Mason and I are proud, proud of our work. But any questions about what we just showed you? I know that was speedy.
I'll say we actually only have the summary slide, and then we'll open up to some questions.
Okay, that sounds good. You want to keep going? Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. So let's do a real quick summary, and then we'll open it up to some questions as well. So kind of in general summarization here. So we talked about the challenges that you and your teams are faced last year. And we talked about some of the priorities and things that we need to get addressed and fixed for this upcoming year to reduce frustration and increase efficiencies. From there, we walked you guys through the anatomy of the accounts payable automation, talking about document capture to OCR over to even invoice approval. After that, we took you guys directly into the wild and showed you guys some invoice processing as well. At this point, this is kind of the end of our presentation. So if there are questions or anything along those lines that we can answer, we'd love to do that at this moment. If I did not answer a question fully earlier when I was answering questions, this is a perfect time to follow some follow-up questions as well.
Hey, Mason, we did have one follow-up question in the group. It was back to in regards of the invoice and capture from email inboxes. And so this customer is saying that they do have a separate inbox for invoices and vendor correspondence, but some of their vendors don't have the capacity to differentiate between the emails. It's a point of frustration for them. I was wondering if maybe I could put you on the spot and you could offer some recommendations or advice.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a frustration, right? Because, you know, as much as we want to design and implement a solution that, you know, works perfect for us, we also have a lot of outside variables that we can't control. So if a vendor is telling us, you know, I can only do one email address, right? And they want to keep sending that can be really frustrating. Specifically, it would depend on what kind of technology you guys are leveraging for workflows right now. But there could be a few different ways we could tackle that. The first one would be just to, you know, digest everything and, you know, maybe go through and, you know, if it stops in the OCR, that's where we respond and do those type of stuff. The other one would be is, I'm not a huge fan of adding this type of like hard coding in a workflow, but we could most definitely add some hard coding in there that says whenever you receive an email from this email address, go ahead and don't ingest it, immediately take it to a workflow for one of your guys' team members to review. It's not my favorite solution, but at the end of the day, we have to work also with what our vendors can handle as well. So, and if there's, if you would like to have a, actual sit down conversation where I can take a look at some of the technologies that you guys have and offer what would be probably my recommendation going forward, I would love to continue that conversation as well. Awesome. I think we might have just lost Hopkins.
Yeah, I think he looks like he's gone.
Yeah, I think we lost Hopkins. But kind of
any
as
other
a quick
questions. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mace.
Yeah, as a quick kind of wrap up slide here. So we are RPI consultants. We're 100 plus full-time consultants at this point, from everything from software developers through project managers, through technical architectures to actual consultants. We're based in Baltimore, Maryland, but we have offices in Tampa, Florida, Kansas City, Missouri, and Scottsdale, Arizona. And we also have another one in Phoenix as well. And we offer a wide array of different technical and professional services, from anything with our Infor teams, Kofax, over to Highland as well, that can do anything from complete net new implementations to upgrades, to even just those solution questions, right? Where I just need you to take a look and maybe help me out with a little workflow. So that is RPI. I don't have an additional slide here at the end, so let me make one super fast. But if you have any questions, you can email questions@rpic.com right there. And those will be directed to our marketing team, and then either Hopkins or someone else on our team can help direct those questions to the best person to help answer those as well. So if there's no additional questions here at the end, I'm not seeing any more. Sherry, are you?
I don't see any. Does anyone have any other questions for us about what we showed and talked about this year in this presentation?
If not, I really appreciate all of you guys taking a time out of your day to sit down and learn a little bit about accounts payable and how we can change what 2021 looks like and our AP solutions going forward.
Thanks very much for being with us, everyone. It's been great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.